Daniel Morcombe and his twin brother Bradley were born on the 19th of December 1989. The Morcombe household, which also included a third brother, was always filled with laughter and joy as the parents Bruce and Denise tried their best to build a great life for their kids. The family lived in the sleepy town of Palm Woods in the Sunshine Coast of Queensland. The area was known to be quite family orientated, and which was why Bruce and Denise chose the location to raise their children. On the 7th of December, 13-year-old Daniel planned to head into town to get a haircut and get an early start on his Christmas shopping. Throwing on a red t-shirt and baggy shorts, Daniel headed to the nearest bus stop around lunchtime to wait for the bus to town. He waited and waited, but the bus took its time to arrive. Bored, the boy wandered to the side of the bus stop and began to draw on the dirt with a tree branch he found lying on the side of the road. Minute after minute passed and the bus still didn't arrive. And then suddenly at 10 minutes past 2 the bus came rushing past, not stopping or slowing down for the boy, who was doing his best to catch the driver's attention. Unbeknownst to Daniel, this bus had directions from the director of the driving company to urgently pick up and drop off passengers who had been delayed by an earlier bus breaking down. There were to be no stops or detours, and so Daniel's urgent signalling was left ignored. But this did not mean the bus driver hadn't seen Daniel. Feeling guilty for leaving the boy behind, the driver called the bus driver, who was a few minutes behind him, to give him a heads up. The bus driver said there was a boy waiting at the stop, and a strange man beside him, watching the young boy. Back at the bus stop, the stranger approached Daniel and offered him a ride to the plaza. Daniel was trusting, and though he knew all about stranger danger, he grew up in a town where nothing bad ever happened, and so Daniel climbed into the stranger's car. A decision he would surely regret soon, after the horrors awaiting for him came to play. Back at the Morcombe household, Bruce and Denise arrived home later than usual, around 6:30 p.m, having attended a Christmas party. They arrived to the scene of a worried Bradley. His twin brother was not back from town yet, and he had promised to be back hours ago. This was so out of Daniel's character that the two parents were immediately alarmed. They grabbed their car keys and headed to the plaza. Surely their boy was there, most likely he just didn't have enough money for the bus home, or he had gotten himself lost. For an hour or two the family did laps around the plaza, but however hard they tried, they could not find Daniel. Finally, they decided to call the police. At the police station, the family were ushered into the office of one of the sergeants. There the sergeant began questioning them about Daniel and possible reasons for his disappearance. The sergeant asked the usual questions, a description of Daniel, the clothes he was wearing that day, whether he was showing any signs of depression, anger or loneliness in the days or weeks before he went missing. During the interview, the family stressed how out of character walking away was for Daniel. He was such a gentle, well-behaved boy, they repeated. But despite the family's distress, the sergeant told the family they needed to wait 48 to 72 hours before Daniel could be labelled as missing. He suggested they all go home, rest, and wait for the boy's return. But of course, rest was not an option for a family that was devoted to one another. Instead, the Morcombes rallied up, grabbed a couple of torches and headed out into the night to search their property. All night the family marched up and down the perimeter, looking into every hole and bush in case Daniel had fallen. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the Morcombes were back at the police station, ready to beg and plead with the officers to take their concerns seriously. This time around, the sergeant called the bus company and talked to the bus driver. The bus driver confirmed seeing Daniel with a red t-shirt and baggy shorts that were dark in colour. With this new piece of information, the Morcombes were back home by 9 a.m. with a whole day ahead of them searching for their missing son. They were not alone, however, though the official search was yet to be announced. Over the next 72 hours, a thorough search for Daniel ensued. There were posters on every shop window, media releases across TV and radio. Everyone in that small town was out searching for the missing boy. The police began to pursue the lead of the mysterious man who had been at the bus stop with Daniel. Going off the description from the bus driver, which was not very detailed, the investigators were looking for a tall and skinny man, possibly a pedophile, which was why they spent some time going through the local registry and groups of known pedophiles in the area. During the next few weeks, calls from Crime Stoppers with names of possible suspects kept the police telephone line very busy, but none of the individuals described seemed to fit with the description of the mysterious man. The investigation into Daniel's disappearance was officially announced on the 8th of December 2003. On the 9th of December, a major incident room was established at the police station dedicated to the case. This room included a large display of physical evidence, and findings were recorded extensively with over 10,000 pages exclusively covering this case. With over 100 police officers involved in this case, this was to become one of the most extensive police searches in all of Queensland's history. It would not be long before one man stood out to the police. That man went by the name of Brett Peter Cohen. For one, his name was mentioned by numerous callers because his profile closely resembled the police sketch that was put out to the public. A welder by trade, Cohen allegedly drove a white four-wheel drive and served time in prison before Daniel's disappearance. Now, a short background on Cohen. He was born on the 18th of September 1969 into a strict Catholic family. His father was often absent from home for long periods due to serving in the army, and also suffered from PTSD. As a young child, Cohen displayed early signs of disturbing behavior. He attended a Catholic high school, and one of his teachers remembered him being a bully, and described instances of Cohen showing off his erections during class time. Later in his teens, he delved into petty crime and drug use, which ultimately landed him a community service sentence when he was 18. It was during one of his community service sessions that he noticed a blonde 7-year-old boy in the playground nearby. Cohen snatched the boy up, dragged him to the nearby toilets, and sexually assaulted him repeatedly. This would become a regular occurrence for Cohen until he was sentenced to a mere 7 years for his acts. And at the time of Daniel's disappearance, Cohen was out of prison. The police were sure this was their guy, but they needed a body and a confession to arrest Cohen. He would not give them either, so they put forward a plan on how to get Cohen to confess. In April 2011, Brett Peter Cohen, now 44, was on a plane heading to his hometown of Perth when he began to chat with a young man sitting beside him. At the end of the flight, they exchanged numbers and met up several times over the next few weeks. Unfortunately for Cohen, Joe, the young man who had befriended him, was an undercover police officer. He portrayed himself as a member of a powerful criminal gang, together with his friends Fitzy and Jeff, another 2 undercover police officers, who Cohen was also introduced to soon after their first encounter. Finally, Joe and his friends offered Cohen a big job worth thousands of dollars. However, they told him that their big boss had heard Cohen had been subpoenaed for the disappearance of Daniel Morcombe. If he didn't want to be dropped by the gang, Cohen needed to confess immediately to the big boss. Unbeknownst to Cohen, the interview between the big boss and him was being recorded, and so too was the chilling confession that came out of the exchange. There was even a video camera at the scene, and this would be played at trial 3 years later, as well as the recording of Cohen showing the undercover cops the bushland where he had dumped Daniel's body.
Sat there and then...
Did you talk to him for long, or?
I didn't talk to him at all when I got there. Maybe just look as though I was waiting for the bus.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yep.
The bus drove past, and that's when I said, I'm going down to the shopping centre, do you want a lift?
Yep.
And he's gone, yep.
So he's missed the bus or something, has he? Or?
No, the bus drove past because it was
Okay.
given the orders not to pick up any more passengers because it was a broken down one, and there'd be another bus through.
Yep. Okay, so you asked him if you want a lift. He said yeah.
Yep. He's jumped in.
Where did he sit in your car? The front, the back?
Seat.
Passenger seat, front.
Passenger
Yep.
seat, yep.
Yep.
Instead of taking him to the shopping centre, I took him to a secluded spot that I knew of.
You taken him to Bewa?
Yeah, went to an abandoned house thing that I knew where...
Like I said, I'm not judging you, alright?
Yeah, well, I never got to molest him or anything like that. He panicked and I panicked and grabbed him around the throat, and just before I knew it, he was dead.
On the 14th of March 2014, Cohen was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. He was also given the sentence of 3.5 years imprisonment for indecently dealing with Daniel and 2 years for interfering with his corpse, both sentences to be served concurrently. Finally, the Morcombe family had answers and some sort of justice for the murder of their boy.